Hi there, everybody, and welcome to episode 266 of The Art of Procurement. I'm your host, Philip Heitzen, and as always, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Well, my guest on the show today is Jason Cammorata. Jason is the Vice President of Strategic Sourcing at MDC Partners. The procurement team at MDC Partners faces a pretty unique challenge. So MDC is an umbrella company, and they have a network of 55 brands across marketing that provide services such as public relations, creative, digital, advertising, and production. So the decentralized corporate model is largely brand-driven, so Jason regularly has to sell the benefits of procurement internally. Well, in today's conversation, we discussed Jason's journey in building a strategic procurement capability and ensuring not only its relevance, but its impact in an environment where they really do have to act as a business rather than a function. Now, today's pod was recorded back at ProcureCon Indirect East. It's a perfect time just to let you know that ProcureCon Indirect West is just around the corner, coming up here in September. So through our partnership with ProcureCon, Art of Procurement listeners get 25% off your ticket to any North America ProcureCon event. So just go to artofprocurement.com/ProcureCon. You'll find all the details and all their upcoming events right there. Now, before I do go into the interview, I do want to thank Tradov for their support of procurement thought leadership and for sponsoring this episode of Art of Procurement. So Tradov eliminates pain points for both buyers and sellers. So whether it's the urgency in the purchasing process, unaligned buying and selling processes, lack of communication and transparency within their own teams, and difficulties discovering new suppliers. And one of the things that you can do with Tradov is build your own private network or community portal for free. So for example, you can create a private network within Tradov where your entire procurement team can share information, post thought leadership, and start group discussions. So it's a little bit like a hybrid of LinkedIn, Slack, and Wiki page all together that brings your team's communications into one place. Then you can switch over to the public areas of Tradov, and you'll join a community of over 250,000 buyers and sellers. As a buyer, you can post your supply needs, and Tradov will then notify the best suited sellers using their AI algorithms across the globe. This gives buyers an opportunity to find new suppliers, receive multiple proposals, and become better informed on the market dynamics of the product or service that they're buying. So to join Tradov for free, whether to create a private network for you and your team, or to discover new suppliers for your next sourcing event, just go to artofprocurement.com/Tradov. That's artofprocurement.com/Tradov. Okay, well, let's go straight into my conversation then with Jason, where I start by asking if he found procurement or if procurement found him.
I'd like to say both. Mm-hmm. I've been a value seeker, I didn't know it, since I was a young child. Mm-hmm. I was always the one in my family to seek out the best deals, plan our travel, get the price on hotels, negotiate the cable bill, which I still do.
You can come to my house if you want. I can have you do all those things for me as well. That sounds great.
My wife kind of questions how much time I actually spend on those things and whether there's value to it. I'm like, I'm having a good time, so leave me alone. So I guess procurement eventually found me the profession of procurement. I was working in ops at the time, and the CPO of our company reached out to me and said, do you want a procurement job? And he said it a little bit more forceful than that, in a good way. I was happy about it. I'll be honest with you, I didn't really know what procurement actually did other than buy things at the time.
Yep. So as you then got into procurement professionally, as opposed to negotiating the cable bill, what was it that kept you?
I'd like to think I'm good at it. I'm not the type of person that does something halfway.
Yeah.
Right. I'm the type of person that if I commit to something, I'm going to do it, and I'm probably going to exceed someone's expectations. So I took the challenge, and I think I'm good at it. So I'm still here.
Something you enjoy doing, something you were making a difference for people organizationally at doing.
At the end of the day, I like relationships.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of it. It's very easy to sit here and say I like to beat people up and get the best price. But ultimately, and I think procurement's learning that and knows that that's not everything.
Yeah. We're evolving. Fortunately, more and more organizations evolving each year from that. There's always an element of it, but I think we're definitely going away from that as a profession. And we have to, if we want to have some kind of sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, everybody within an organization should concentrate on cost savings.
Yeah.
Like, it shouldn't just be procurement. Everybody should. So that's a component, obviously, of what we do and hopefully are doing very well and can lead it. But we should be able to inject that method within the various parts of the business, from my point of view.
So I want to just ask a question which helps for context. I wonder if you could just provide a little bit more info on what MDC Partners is, because it's an organization that, frankly, until I've seen your name and I've seen your events and things like that, I didn't know who you were and kind of what the organization did. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about MDC, but also the context of your team as well, because I think the way that procurement is structured at MDC is perhaps a little different than what some of the listeners will be used to in their own companies.
Yeah, not a lot of people have heard of MDC, and that's okay. We own about 55 marketing brands. Okay. So think PR, creative, like digital, advertising, production, media. So mostly they know our companies.
Yeah, they'll know your brands within the umbrella, but not the umbrella company.
Exactly. So we're the parent organization, and we're one of the smaller parent companies in this industry, in marketing. And so with that, the differentiator between MDC and the reason I came to MDC is our decentralization. And what that means is we let each business unit continue to do creatively what they need to do for their clients. Yeah. Right. And so that was very important to me because I came from an organization before that was a little bit different. Yeah. So from a procurement perspective, we're not negotiating. We're not a centralized center. We're not a center of excellence. I'll say it that way. We're negotiating enterprise contracts. We're negotiating one-off contracts. And then, of course, we have cost savings initiatives that we're looking at. But really what I'm passionate about as well is providing data back to the organization. Yeah. Because one of the cool things about a decentralized environment is, since we don't aggregate the data, our team, procurement, is one of the only teams, really the only team, that sees every single part of the business. So with that, we have a lot of data. Yeah. So in your environment then, if you're working kind of cross-brand, but you're working decentralized, how do you figure out what to get involved in? Is it there's a category here that we think should be aligned across the business. We're going to take the initiative to go and try and connect all the different stakeholders across the portfolio. Or we're hearing from 5 different brands who are having a problem in this space. Let's combine it all together and see what we can do at a corporate level. Like, how do those projects come about? I wish I had an easy answer, right? But I don't. So it's happened kind of organically. So there's an element in our business that is based on client need. Yeah. And when a client needs something, typically our big brands, that will go through our agencies, and that will go to us as well. But then it becomes about what can we offer our agencies that's innovative for their clients as well. Yeah. And what can we offer to our agencies that is competitive in pricing, since they're consultants literally for our clients, spending on behalf of our clients. So that's part of it. And then another part of it is, what do we need to react to today? And we get email. We get a lot of emails, right? And I think that's a good thing.
People know you exist, which is a good starting point. They need your help.
Yeah, I guess it's better than them saying go away. Yeah. So, I talk to a lot of procurement professionals, and they say, well, I wish we were used more, involved earlier. It's interesting because we're actually having the opposite problem. We're being used quite a bit, and I wish that we had more people to help them. Right. And to drive change.
Yeah, and so you don't want to give them an experience which then means they may not work with you again in the future, but just because you're resource constrained.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit obsessive about responding. I believe communication is one of the most important assets to any company, any person, any family, country, whatever, world, right? A lot of the world's problems might be solved by better communication because a lot of it's misunderstanding. Yeah. So I believe in responsiveness. So I struggle just as an individual about being overly responsive. So something I need to deal with is, how do I be not less responsive, but how do I be more calculated in my responses and our team's responses versus reactionary?
You're working with marketers every day. From a procurement perspective, that's obviously a difficult category when we're on the buying side of in marketing because of the creativity. And creativity doesn't often fit in our paradigm of how to buy unless we kind of change that up and apply a different model to buying marketing services. Now, do you suffer from your procurement, within a marketing community that you support, or do you not feel that marketers look at procurement in that way? Like they don't have that negative connotation, perhaps, where they may do in other companies?
It's a good question. I think some marketing agencies are fearful of the word procurement. Mm-hmm. Some, I don't say all of them, just because it is hard for those agencies to quantify creative value. Yeah. It's one of the biggest questions in the world. What are the chills worth, in watching a commercial or understanding the impact of a brand?
How do you get the X factor?
Yeah.
We had a podcast last year called How to Buy a Gorilla, and it was all about buying marketing services. The gorilla in that context was basically the star of a Cadbury's advert, and all the creative investment that went to creating something which is just a 30-minute slot that would never have been able to be done if we constrained everybody's roles. True. But it's really hard to scope that.
Yes, and it's hard for procurement to understand that. It's hard for me to understand that. How do you, because we're used to putting value, we want to put value to everything. And a lot of us, how we report in, we're supposed to be assigning value to things to prove our value. Yeah. Right. So procurement does have a bit of a, I don't want to say negative connotation, but some people are fearful of it. Yeah. But we're trying to educate people as well, as part of what we do, that procurement's not bad, right? To those that are fearful of it. Yeah. They're just doing their jobs. Yeah. And so we need to help educate procurement, just like procurement needs to educate marketing on how to more effectively do their jobs so we can work collaboratively.
Yeah, and I imagine you have an opportunity to help the brands actually communicate with the procurement teams of their prospects, and kind of bridge some of that gap as well, because you can help kind of share, this is the perspective that procurement's actually going to be coming from, where they may not actually understand that. So
we do get calls and emails from time to time, and some of them are like, I don't know what to do, right? Or I don't know what this means. And we're very careful on how we give advice, because sometimes we don't know what it means either. Yeah. All I could do is offer a perspective and into insight into what procurement's goals are in general. And a lot of it, again, goes back to communication. Is if you as a supplier or a vendor partner cannot do something for your client, you have to say that, right? And not be fearful. You must be confident in your position. That's a lot of it.
As you think about some of the skills that are more valuable in an environment that's decentralized, when you think about your team and when you're hiring, what are you looking for in people to be successful in that environment?
Okay, so thinking about technical talent, to me, I think it's less important. Yeah. It is important. It's less important than interpersonal skills. Yeah. I'd rather personally work with somebody that I respect, maybe you don't always understand or agree with, because I do think it's important to diversify points of views and hire someone that's got a different point of view than others. I love to disagree with people, kindly, of course.
Debate.
It's healthy. But ultimately, do you respect that person? Can someone talk to that person, perhaps disagree with them, and can that person lay out their case and convince the other individual or entity that their position is correct, or somehow to meet somewhere? Yeah. So interpersonal skills is probably the most important factor. Someone who's hungry to just do a lot of work, at least on our team. Yeah. Right. There's no necessary line of what they're going to do in our company for various people. I think it's important that they're open to doing things that are not necessarily typical procurement. Yeah,
so it's less of a here's your 5 roles and responsibilities, but kind of flexibility, looking for somebody who's able to be flexible and do different things, apply those interpersonal skills in different ways.
I think I'd rather say lay out, this is what we want to do as a department. Let's all agree on it, and let's assign roles, of course, but let's collectively hunt it down and do it together.
How have you seen, because in this kind of environment, you talked about differing opinions, and I'm sure you come into contact with a lot of stakeholders that have very different opinions.
In marketing?
Yeah.
Never.
than what you have. So conflict is such a big thing, like managing conflict in a way that is respectful and that still drives to, hopefully, a shared understanding of what the next steps are. I wonder if you could share some of the ways that you actually approach it, or that you look for your team to approach managing conflict.
So conflict I believe is good, right? So good conflict, productive conflict. No one should insult each other by any means, right? But I feel conflict is healthy. I mean, I have conflict all the time with my wife. Doesn't mean I dislike her. I love her, right? It doesn't mean our household doesn't operate correctly. Actually, we're doing quite well in our household. Yeah. It means that we talk it out, and we each have our own point of view. So I believe that conflict is okay, and we shouldn't. I think it's easy to go into conflict and to get defensive. Maybe it's a confidence thing. Maybe it's maybe they're right. Maybe that's why they're defensive. Maybe a lot of reasons, right? Yeah. So I try to actively approach things not on the defense, but more understanding another's point of view. Yeah,
kind of the empathy.
Very good.
Because I think we do miss that. We miss it with stakeholders. What's really been interesting to me is I've matured. My procurement journey as well is like putting yourself in other people's shoes, because most decisions aren't made based on data. Most decisions are made based on emotion.
Yes.
And so when we look at that, we think this decision doesn't make sense, but they obviously have an emotional reason to make a decision in a particular way. We may not understand it, but actually acknowledging the fact that that's how it is made helps you be able to be more effectively influence or persuade somebody.
For sure. And the world is talking, a lot of the world's talking more about diversity, right? And that's the perk of diversity, right? Is bringing in different perspectives. So it's just not the club, right? At work, we're all coming up with the same ideas. We're getting others' point of view, and it's important to hear that.
So I'm interested, again, within your environment, a lot of times we rely on processes and frameworks and playbooks, things like that. You're in an environment where there isn't necessarily every one opportunity you have to work with somebody is the same. So you have to have a lot of flexibility. You talked about that before. Do you still have process and frameworks to help guide that flexibility? How do you kind of manage that balance between consistency and wanting scale, but not just here's my 7 steps?
So I'm considering myself a nice person, and a lot of people say, Jason, you're really nice. And I am. I like people. So, but I will say that when we come up with a process, or if there's a reason for doing something, I'm firm. So I think of it kind of like having a family or children. I don't want to say it like that, but there's a time with your children that obviously you want to be open to your children, their ideas, but there's a time where you know best as well. And so having confidence around those times is important. Yeah. So while there are not as many processes as I would wish for currently, we're actively developing them. And the ones that we do have are effective and work quite well.
Right. So it's kind of balancing what you use when you use them, but when you're going to use them, use it.
Right. And sometimes with more process becomes more time needed. And candidly, we don't have a lot of time. So we're trying to streamline what we can and create process around where there can be maximum value. Yeah. And for me, that's mostly like operational processes.
I think one of the things that is really the role of procurement is to drive change, to help the organization see things in a different way, understand different perspectives, look at innovation, like different business models, you name it. We're always trying to not change for the sake of change, but, the idea of thinking differently. Why do you do this? Does it make sense to do it? I wonder if I know you talked here at ProcureCon around change management strategies. Do you have like a set way that you manage change, or is it more a set of principles that you try and follow that helps take people on a change journey with you?
So I like to operate in the truth. And I know it sounds weird. I think a lot of people may be talking about it, but I like to operate with what is true. So our executive team has certain goals, and actually we have a new CEO has certain goals, part of them cost savings, which I agree with. And then we have people that are maybe, I don't want to say lower level, but in the business units doing the actual business that has a point of view.
Yeah.
They may have conflicting points of view.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're both wrong. It just means that we need to get them together.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the great things about our procurement organization, and I may have said this, is that we're talking to all of these people, including executive management. So my hope is that we could drive change by providing data to both ends, right? And if the change, if I believe in the change and our team believes in change, and it's operating from the truth, I believe that it'll be executed. And we don't always get our wish.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's things we don't know about.
Yeah.
But I think that for me, it's most important to keep driving ahead and operating in the truth, and try to be very confident in doing so.
I think in your situation as well, in a decentralized organization, but you're essentially operating as the private equity management company would across a portfolio of products.
Yes.
You get a picture of the business that most people in the organization don't get. And so the data is really important because others don't even get that perspective, so you're able to bring the data to share. Well, actually, this is what's happening. It may be different than what you think is happening.
Yes, I love those moments. Like, that's awesome to be able to facilitate that, or at least be the conduit that it flows through. And to me, that's value. Like, it's one thing to say I saved, $10 million or whatever. Great. Like, that's automatic to what procurement should do. And really what everybody in the organization should be doing. But it's really cool to be that data conduit.
As you think about the data, what kind of challenges do you have in getting good data across multiple organizations? Because, it's hard enough within a single you're a single organization. It's hard enough within one that's connected around, built around a central model, a centralized model. A decentralized model where I'm sure that a lot of your brands and the companies within your portfolio, they're kind of coming in, they're going out as you divest assets, as you bring new assets in. How are you managing that in a way that actually enables you to keep track of it, but have good data, essentially?
Well, so we're lucky, for the most part, and we do operate in a decentralized way, but we do wholly own everybody.
Yeah.
And for the most part, everybody's staying in the network, right? So everybody we've had continuity, I'll say it
so
that way.
So you've not got companies coming in, companies leaving as you divest?
A little bit, but like one or two, we're not talking about a lot. Yeah. So the relationships that we've built have been sustaining or long
There's not a lot of
lasting.
churn in the network.
No, it doesn't seem to be. So the data that I'm speaking of may be not as technical as I'd like. We don't have a centralized financial system.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it's still manual. That's a pain, right? But it's necessary. Yeah. So we do what we can with what we have. And sometimes that data is not just numbers. Maybe it's, here's something in the marketplace that can add to our competitive advantage based on what we're seeing here, or based on who we're talking to, or based on this vendor partner that we have a relationship with. Yeah. So that's more the type of data that I'm talking about, not necessarily technical data.
Yeah.
Although I'd love to have that as well.
Yeah, but it's the ability to connect everybody around central purposes and opportunities that may happen in the marketplace.
Yes, it's how can we increase our competitive advantage? Yeah. That's a key word.
Yeah.
How can our business units increase their competitive advantage? And how can they provide the best services to their clients? At the end of the day, it's a client-driven business. Yeah.
When you pitch procurement to new stakeholders, or you're trying to convince a new stakeholder to work with you, do you connect how you help to their competitive advantage, how they are able to make a difference for the organization? Kind of what's the sales pitch?
Typically, our first conversation is about food and travel.
That's what's important.
Kinda. Yeah. Why do we all work? No, I'm just kidding. But I think I like to have relationships. Yeah. So, our first conversation's usually around who am I, who are you, where do you come from, what do you want, or I should say need. Need is a more important word. What do you need? And then I tell them historically what we're doing, what we've done. And then I'm open to changing things, some things, right? Not everything. And then we develop a relationship. But I think procurement is consistently, I hear, is concerned about people not utilizing them correctly, too late, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that does happen. But that's not just procurement. That's everybody. That's our CFO. Yeah. So I'm going to be blunt. Like, I think we should stop whining.
Yeah.
And just get on with it, right? You either add value or you don't, and there's a confidence in that.
It's funny how we think that it goes back to empathy again. And it's like we think that procurement function is the only one that struggles with these challenges.
Correct.
But you go to every single business leader and they have exactly the same challenge. Maybe it's got some different words or some different jargon or whatever wrapped around it. But they have the same challenges in their day job. They have the same fears about what technology is going to do to their organization. And they're not really sure what's happening. But we look at them as, they're all buttoned up. We're the ones that are grappling with this. Really, everyone's struggling with the same things.
You're 100% correct. And when you struggle with those things, you put up a defense.
Yeah.
And I'm not speaking for everybody. I don't know, but just speaking to myself, right? Yeah. So you put up a defense.
Can protect yourself.
Yes, and it's either some people react differently. Some people, I know everything my way or the highway. That's not good, right? Mm-hmm. Or okay, whatever you need, you're a pushover. That's not good. So there's different ways that people react to that, but I think it's an inherent problem. I think procurement needs to get over it. Yeah. Let's stop. It's okay to talk about it for sure, but let's just do the work
and keep it within our own our circle. We can grumble about it, but don't let that impact then how we're working with people.
And that's another thing. And just to go on, you're sparking a little passion in me. Is one of my biggest dislikes is spending lots of time proving value.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody in all of the departments has to prove their value ultimately. Either they're providing value or they're not.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, procurement spends a lot of time on the savings tracker, back and forth, whatever they have to do. And every organization is different. I'm not saying I disagree with it. We have something I like to call the project tracker.
Mm-hmm. Not a savings tracker.
Not savings, nope. Right? Because there's other things involved in this project. But I don't spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
Because I'd rather be doing stuff. Because doing stuff is going to actually have the effect on my business. And I say my business because I want to act as a business owner. Right?
Now, do you think we do that because the justification of value, because we're not confident in the value we create, or that we're not confident others see the value in what we create?
Maybe it's a little bit of everything, and I don't want to speak for everybody because so I'll speak based on maybe my experiences and what I've heard. I think for sure finance leans on procurement for cost savings. Okay. So in finance is typically procurement's boss.
Yep. Pay the bills.
Right. But you should also be confident to finance. Finance is under the same pressure that you are.
Yep.
And so it's literally just transferring that pressure over. There's a way to work collaboratively versus reactionary.
I strongly believe in a governance process when you have savings. I'm talking about savings where you're actually having finance, you're having a stakeholder at the very beginning of a project. This is how we're going to calculate value. This is what value looks like on this project. And having everyone agree to it at the beginning, so at the end, all it is a calculation. Because it's at the end when we start to argue, well, we create value in this way and that way, and then that's all just about us trying to make our metrics look as good as they possibly can.
And who's going to claim it?
That's not about anybody else.
You're right.
And that then shows to me that we're trying to justify something that may not be real, or isn't readily apparent to the people that we're working with. And again, should we be claiming stuff that isn't apparent to somebody else? Because that's where the idea of procurement math comes in, where nobody then believes what we tell them and believes what the metrics are. So I know it's a fine line. It's hard because we're trying to scrape and save every single dollar we can when that's our only metric. But I think that it sends the message that it's about us rather than it's about you.
That's a really smart way to look at it. Because we talked in our team about all the time is actually giving others the credit. Mm-hmm. And that's a way to do that because it's not just my dollar savings and maybe they increased sales or whatever they did with it. Or it's a joint win. And we try not to take the credit as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is oversimplified, but it's been my rule of thumb is that no one's going to fire me as a procurement leader if everybody in the organization at the executive level believes I'm creating value for their team. 100%. However, I will get fired if I exceed by a factor of 2 my savings target if everybody hates me and they don't want to work with me on my team.
That is correct.
And so that's always the approach I've tried to take and instill in my team. It's like, I'll create the safe space for you as a team where I'll protect you from that. But if if everyone's getting value in what we're getting, it's not going to be a conversation.
Exactly. And I think the way you know that you are providing value is people are calling you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they want to work with you.
Yeah.
It goes back to that.
Right, because it's hopefully the team effort.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jason, I know it's about time for us to wrap up, so I want to thank you very much for joining me on the podcast.
Happy to.
The last question is the easy question, and I'm not trying to trip you up here. It really is the easy question. Where can listeners find you if they would like to reach out, connect with you, once they've listened to the podcast?
LinkedIn.
Yep.
LinkedIn has the monopoly. That's it.
I know.
I tried Twitter, but you'd think I'd be on Twitter, but I'm not really.
Yeah, Twitter is. I spend too much time there. And that's the place where I probably say stuff I shouldn't say and get angry, So LinkedIn is the place to be.
Nothing wrong with brutal honesty.
Yeah.
I respect that.
Well, I'm going to include the link to your LinkedIn profile in our show notes. Those are going to be at artofprocurement.com/podcast. That's artofprocurement.com/podcast. Jason, one last time, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Hi there. I want to thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. You can check out all of our back catalogue at artofprocurement.com/podcast, where you can also subscribe to our newsletter to make sure that you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's show, I'd love if you would tell a peer, or perhaps go and rate and review by going to artofprocurement.com/review. Word of mouth really is the best way to help the podcast grow, and if you're able to do either one of those things, I would truly appreciate it.